Hey everybody! I thought I would talk to you today about the building of America's first subway system. It happens during the Gilded Age, in the 1890s, and why not talk about it a little bit? I think it's a very cool story, and I think it will add something to our Gilded Age lectures. So here we go. I titled it "The Race Underground: The Struggle to Build the Boston Subway System." It was quite a struggle, so very interesting thing. Let's get started. The first subway in America was built in Boston, Massachusetts, not in New York, Boston. Woohoo! They built it in 1897. The Boston subway only came about due to the specific invention of the electric motor in the late 19th century by a guy named Frank Sprague. He was an interesting fellow because he didn't want to work for Edison because he was afraid Edison would steal his designs. And of course, take his name off the motor and put Edison's on. And as we'll see later, that's kind of exactly what happens. But he's a guy who invents the electric motor. Now, they need a reason to use the electric motor. After Sprague successfully installed his motor in trolleys in Richmond, Virginia in 1888, it prompted Henry Whitney, the owner of the West End Railway in Boston, Massachusetts, to upgrade his trolleys to run on electricity the following year, use this engine that Sprague had created. This experiment in clean energy is what later made it possible to convince lawmakers, businessmen, and the general public that it was feasible to run these electric trolleys underground in Boston. Why run underground, though? Boston, like many cities in the Gilded Age, had a problem with congestion in the streets. Too many people, of course, too many streetcars, too many horses, and you got to have a place to put all that stuff. And Boston streets, if you've ever been to Boston, are not really known as wide, thoroughfares. This is a puritanical city, founded in the 1600s, and these streets are tiny. Now, to remedy this problem, city administrators proposed building a road underground to transport people around the city. Hey, sounds like a good idea. However, to many people, this seemed to fly in the face of common sense. Why would you want to travel underground when you can do just as well traveling above ground? Traveling underground, many people thought it was dangerous. There were gases down there. There was all kinds of unknown things down there. And why would you travel? It's just weird to travel underground. Not to mention that many God-fearing citizens, hey, we got to remember this is Boston. Many God-fearing citizens believed it brought you closer to the underworld and therefore to the devil himself. And so there's a religious reason to not travel underground, as well as a safety reason to not travel underground. But people in Boston, they have their opinions about this new mode of travel, and that's something that they're going to have to get. The people to build this are going to have to get around. Now, to overcome these fears, the City Council authorized the formation of the Rapid Transit Committee, and the state legislature passed an act allowing for the formation of a committee to promote rapid transit in the city. Yay! The members of the Rapid Transit Committee then traveled to London, because in London is where they're going to see the first underground rail system, and they get to view that system and learn kind of what they did, and then try to improve upon it to build the one in Boston. Once plans to build the subway were announced, the people of Boston were inclined to be opposed to its construction from the very beginning, of course, especially since it was to be built through the Boston Common, which many people considered sacred. Remember, the Boston Common is supposed to be, it's a commonwealth. It's supposed to be for everybody. It's a place where people can go to walk and stroll and read and relax and run or do whatever. And it's still there today, of course, but the plans for it were going to infringe on the Boston Common. They're going to dig up the Common. And of course, that was going to be a problem. Since colonial times, the Common was a place where Bostonians could come and just kind of relax every day, and people saw that as an affront. Why would you dig up the common? The very idea that could be destroyed aroused the cries in the city to, quote unquote, save the common, right? And 12,000 signatures were obtained to make sure that the subway stayed out of the common. Wow, these guys are really opposed to the subway. It's an amazing way to get around. Now, city planners calmed Bostonians' fears by telling them that it would only encroach on the edges of the common along Fremont and Boylston Streets. However, approximately 1 month into excavation along Boylston Street, a medical student walking through the construction site stepped on a human bone. He thought it was something else, but after further examination, figured out, oh my gosh, this is a human bone. There are skeletons here. Oh goodness. It was soon discovered that diggers had stumbled upon a Revolutionary War burial ground, and people there, were probably from the Revolutionary War and maybe a little bit later. According to Green's report, the remains were given to Lewis Jones and Son, an undertaker, for reburial in the Central Street burying ground. And they'll eventually, I think, rebury roughly 90 bodies that they identify. Now, the undertakers chose a spot where the remains could be buried in a row by themselves without disturbing any of the other graves around them. And a plaque was placed above the remains, which read, "Here were interred the remains of persons found under the Boylston Street Mall during the digging of the subway in 1895. Of course, it's still there today. If you go and see Boston, you can go and see it. Now, how do you build a subway, right? In a city full of streets that already have, I mean, these guys have cobblestone streets. It's been around for a minute. How do you build a subway underneath all of that? Well, the technique most used to build the Boston subway, and of course emulated later with the New York subway, is a process called cut and cover. In this technique, trenches are dug along in sections about 10 feet long and 12 feet wide and about 6 feet deep. Wood braces are then installed to prevent the dirt from caving in across the top, and then they're placed on the sides to make sure that it doesn't cave in from the sides. And then along the top, you create a roof for bricks to be laid, and then you lay bricks in that space, and now you have a subway, and you can lay the street on top of it, and then you go along the next one. Workers continued to dig the trench deeper. Once it was deep enough, steel support beams were placed along the sides of the walls and along the top, perpendicular to the tracks. Workers then built the walls and floors with concrete reinforced by the steel beams and added waterproof grout. In case you're wondering how you build a subway, there you go. Masons and steel workers then constructed a roof of the tunnel by building brick arches between the steel support beams and finished the upper surface with a layer of concrete and soil. The cut and cover technique was so successful that there was very little interruption to the street traffic above. In fact, in a lot of cases, street traffic above continued on without too much trouble. This technique later became the standard practice in nearly all American subway construction, especially in the ones coming in other cities after Boston, right? A few years later, on March 4th, 1897, another much bigger problem occurred. Just as subway construction was nearing completion, by March of 1897, we're getting really close. Everything's going really well. We've overcome, objections from the people and this whole, buried bodies in the edge of the common. As we're nearing completion, a large gas explosion occurs on the corner of Boylston and Tremont Streets after a break in an old gas main on Boylston Street, which was not looked after well, and nobody really did anything to stop it. Builds up gas wafts basically into the air above, fills a large subway tunnel below. Although the gas had been leaking for months and complaints had been made to the gas company as far back as December, the source of the leak was never found or repaired. And so as that thing gathers up, now you've got a ton of gas underneath the streets and the subway system. Now, March 4th, 1897 at 11:45 a.m., sparks from the wheels of a street trolley, turning the corner at Tremont Street, ignited the gas and set off a large explosion that killed 10 people, seriously injured 60 others, and caused extensive damages to nearby buildings. City planners calmed Bostonians' fears by telling them that they had discovered the leak and that it had been fixed. They do actually go in and fix the leak, but the damage is kind of done. Wow, this is dangerous stuff. Despite the accident, though, the subway construction still went ahead as scheduled and was completed by the end of the summer. Yay! Now, with its completion, Boston street congestion was a thing of the past. Streetcars and trolleys and horse-drawn wagons were removed entirely from city streets, and the subway was now the most efficient and effective mode of travel in the city. It soon becomes kind of the only way people want to travel in the city. Eyeing the success of the Boston subway system, New York, of course, began constructing its subway system in 1900, which they finished on by 1904. Though Sprague had wanted to stay away from working for Edison, of course, this is where the fun part gets to happening. For fear that he would steal his idea, of course, with the electric motor. In the end, it was not to be. Seeing the success of Sprague's electric motor and the success it had enjoyed in Richmond and then in Boston, Edison will purchase Sprague's electric motor for the General Electric Company, or Edison's General Electric, what we know today as the General Electric Company. And of course, as soon as he purchases that motor, he will replace Sprague's name with his own, and it will become Edison's electric motor. And of course, there's the end of Frank Sprague. But we should not forget Frank Sprague, because without him, the ability to travel on subways just wouldn't be. So hey, always remember the little guy, and don't forget about where the first subway system came from: Boston, Massachusetts, 1897. Thanks for watching. Give me a like if you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.